Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you all. This is your host Aminah Ahmed, and you're watching Muslim Network TV. Welcome back to another episode of Next Gen, where we sit with organizers, activists, advocates, change makers in their communities, people who are making a difference in the community that they come from. You're watching us all on Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and Galaxy 19 satellite. The issue of Palestine, of Palestinian oppression and occupation, of forced evictions. This is all something that we have discussed in terms of the history that has led up to it. But today's discussion with Ramah Awad, a Palestinian organizer, is a bit different in that we want to talk about the changes that we've seen since the last 10 days of Ramadan, when we saw Israel's military come in and attack one of the holiest sites in Islam on possibly the holiest night of Laylatul Qadr. We see forced evictions, we see displacement, what is happening in Sheikh Jarrah right now, and we are seeing Palestinian youth who are standing up being detained based on no evidence. They have no cases, no trials. Truly an occupation that we are seeing happen right now. Thank you to Ramah Awad, who is a Palestinian community organizer based in San Diego, California. She grew up between San Francisco Bay Area and Palestine. She spent her high school years in Palestine. She's familiar with what life is like there. Even from her college days, Ramah has been involved, and right now she is a part of PYM, the Palestinian Youth Movement. She serves in the executive board. Thank you so much, Ramah Awad, for being here with us, and thank you for the incredible and brave work that you are doing.
Thank you, Aminah, for having me.
Now, Ramah, this is something that we have seen for the past month, right now. What changes in the attitudes of the general American public have you seen towards Palestinian oppression?
Sure. I think with all the escalation that we've been seeing in Palestine, beginning with Sheikh Jarrah, but of course not limited to Jerusalem, extending through the Gaza Strip, is that more and more people across the United States are waking up to the realities that Palestinians endure in Palestine and globally for that in that case. And I think that we've seen again kind of unprecedented levels of awareness in this past period. More and more people have been speaking out. More and more people have been asking questions and seeking resources and education on the topic. And so I definitely think that this past period of escalation in Palestine has shaken more of the American public, and more people are paying attention.
And I think that this is something that we need to keep, right? And not just keep it as a trend. We need people to continue to pay attention, because although Israel declared a so-called ceasefire, I mean, can you tell us how have they been able to maintain that ceasefire?
Yeah, so while a ceasefire was declared, Israeli violence against Palestinians has not stopped. Mm-hmm. So even if the direct bombing of the Gaza Strip has ended, we're still seeing the ongoing violence against Palestinians, the ongoing theft of land, the expansion of settlements, the displacement and dispossession of families in Sheikh Jarrah has not been fully halted. That's been just paused right now. So I think it's very clear that the ceasefire, it brought us some relief in that people in the Gaza Strip are not under direct harm, but the occupation is still ongoing. And so I think it's really important that we use this moment to continue organizing and continue talking about Palestine so long as there's an active occupation.
Right. And Ramah, you talk about the Gaza Strip, where we saw 60 children being murdered by Israeli militants by bombs. We saw, kids that were just going out to buy groceries for their mom. Some kids were playing in their front yard, 3 years old. We had a kid, 1.5-year-old, that was bombed. So now when we see all of this happening, and people still labeling it a conflict, what does that mean? Why is it so harmful when people call Palestinian oppression and occupation a conflict?
Right. So I think that the term conflict is really a euphemism for what's happening on the ground. I think that the term conflict also obscures or ignores the fact that there is a huge power imbalance in the Palestinian context, meaning that we have one of the largest well-equipped militaries in the world occupying a civilian population that has no state, that has no army, that has no means of real self-defense, or ensuring that its rights are being secured. So I think it's really important that we don't minimize the situation. It's not a conflict between two equal parties or two equal sides. There's a clear power imbalance. And I think the most accurate way to talk about what's happening in Palestine is a settler colonial project. You can see the ways that the Israeli state is doing everything it can to ensure that there are minimum Palestinians on minimum land. And so for us, that's a clear case of settler colonialism. And I think it's really important that we don't shy away from calling it what it is.
I think that is a clear message to a lot of people in the media who have been, calling it a conflict. What changes have you seen in international media coverage in the Palestinian oppression and occupation? How have people started to view, and not just view, but also portray this not just as a conflict in the media?
Right. I think we've come a long way. I think especially in the last month or so, we've seen more refer to it as a case of apartheid. Recently, the Human Rights Watch put out a report detailing the ways that Israeli treatment of Palestinians amounts to the crime of apartheid. And so I think people are more and more calling it what it is, calling it a case of apartheid. And I think that's really powerful. It's really powerful for the global consciousness around how do we stand in solidarity with Palestine. It also has utility in international advocacy, right? So I think more and more we're seeing people call it apartheid and call it military occupation.
Right. And I think that you make it really clear that it's important to not minimize this, right? To not just label it a conflict, because obviously, like you mentioned before, a conflict is between two parties that are equal in power. And that is totally not what we're seeing here right now in Palestine. Now, through the advocacy work that you have been doing, right? This is not something new for you that you started in the last 2 months. Ramah, you did cut out just a bit for me, but my question to you is, through your advocacy work, what changes have you seen, what beneficial changes have we seen happen?
Sure. So I think where my work has been mainly focused is about raising political consciousness amongst not just the general American public, but my own community. And I think what we've been seeing recently is that all of that grassroots work around education and awareness is actually beginning to trickle up through members of Congress, through local advocacy, and we're seeing more and more legislation put out directly targeting military funding to Israel. And I think the scope of resolutions that we're seeing recently, AOC put one out. I think it was also endorsed by Senator Bernie Sanders, calling for the immediate halt in military sales to Israel, right? There's also the Betty McCollum bill that's been seeking to condition military funding to Israel because of its treatment of Palestinian children. And so we're seeing national or federal legislation that is getting more at the root cause of this problem, which is US military funding to Israel. And so I think that trickle up towards advocacy is really a product of a lot of the grassroots work that has been taking place for so many years now.
Thank you, Ramah. You did cut out just a bit for me at the end, but we will continue the discussion about what people in the international community can do to aid Palestinians, what they can do to uplift Palestinians, and as well as your advocacy work right after our short break. You're all watching us on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and Galaxy 19 satellite. We'll be right back after our break.
Billboards are popping up all over the country with an...
Our neighbors don't realize that Muslims are absolutely opposed to ISIS. Salam. My name is Abdul Malik Mujahid. I'm an imam in Chicago.
16 shots! No peace! No justice! No peace!
So how do we bring up the energy which can really have an impact on the world?
You need to build bridges of understanding among people, and we need to have America moving forward.
That lesson learned brought the strength of humanity to America, which is the diversity.
Mujahid Talks, only on Muslim Network TV. Faithfully connected.
Welcome back to NextGen. I'm here with Ramah Awad, a Palestinian advocate and organizer who's been in the space for a while now. She's been advocating for her people and has been doing so pretty effectively. Thank you, Ramah, for being with us again. Now, Ramah, what I want to address here is, have you and other Palestinian youth in America faced backlash for the work that you do?
Yes. So even beginning with my student activism in college, a lot of us have been directly targeted and blacklisted for our work. So I'm sure you and others have heard of that website called Canary Mission. And so we've been definitely made the targets of these smear campaigns for our activism around Palestine. The intention being to reduce our abilities to find work, our eligibility for grad programs, And so I think for us, we've definitely seen repression on individual scale as well as movement-wide scale. So there's been, in the past 5 or so years, a lot of anti-BDS legislation. So this is legislation that is seeking to criminalize anyone that is active with boycotts, divestment, and sanctions against Israel. And so we've definitely seen a rise in this repression, but for us, we see it as a signal that our work and our activism is actually being effective. Because I don't think that Zionist organizations would be targeting BDS activism if they didn't feel in any way threatened.
So, Ramah, you and others have been the target of smear campaigns, but I think that one thing that could possibly other youth advocates, and I don't think that they can go out and target everyone in the space, is other young people, hopefully from other communities, stand up in allyship with Palestinians. Ramah, what can other young people do to help you out? What can they do aside from just posting on social media and attending protests? How can they continue this movement so it doesn't just remain or get labeled a trend in a way?
Yes. So you're right to say that it's not just, they can't target everyone. And I think the more that our movements are growing and when we see more and more people join the movement, I think it also is a form of defense where as we grow in numbers, it's harder and harder to actually repress the movement. So I think there's power in numbers. I think that one of the most effective ways that people can get involved is to join a local organization that is active on Palestine. I think that while individual posting on social media and individual activism is necessary, we are more powerful together when we're able to coordinate our efforts and put in our time and labor into joint campaigns and joint work. So I really encourage everyone tuning in today to find a local organization, because I genuinely believe that that's one of the best ways to build this movement. And then, of course, there are several campaigns under the banner of boycott, divestment, sanctions, the BDS movement. And I think that's one of the most effective ways that anyone in the United States can be leveraging their positionality to target the Israeli occupation. So those are some of my thoughts on where to plug in.
Thank you, Ramah, for sharing with us. Hopefully other young people can benefit from your advice. But I want to talk a little bit about PYM. You are such an integral part of that movement as its executive member. You've helped locally and on a larger scale as well. Tell us a bit about the work of PYM.
Sure. So PYM, the Palestinian Youth Movement, is a grassroots organization of Palestinian and Arab youth organizers. A lot of our work is locally focused on mobilizing our own communities towards being active in our national struggle. And I think it's really important that as Palestinians in the diaspora, we don't just see ourselves as being in solidarity with our own people, but rather that we are active strugglers in our own movement. And so I think for us, it's a really empowering space to take ownership of a movement that has been so attacked and so disintegrated by the powers that be. And so for us, we do a lot of work that looks like political education. We've led international delegations. We do a lot of campaigns targeting Zionist institutions and organizations where we live. And so for us, it's been really important. And I think this period for us has been one of incredible growth for our movement. So I'm really excited to see what's to come.
Right. Thank you, Ramah. It definitely seems like organizations like Canary Mission can't stop the work that you are doing. Those organizations, those Zionist organizations whose whole purpose is to put down youth Palestinian activists and advocates. I don't think that they are successful. And we see that through you, through people like you that continue the work that you're doing bravely. So thank you for being on our show today. And again, I really want to thank you for what you are doing and for inspiring the young people of our generation, hopefully to our young people that are watching, that you can get involved, that you too can follow in the footsteps of Palestinian elders that have been doing this work for a very long time. Thank you, Ramah, for being here with us today.
Thank you, Aminah, for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And to our audience, thank you so much for joining. I do apologize for the connection issues, and inshallah next week that won't be a problem. All of you take care, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you.